Today we will be exploring Mixins in React.js. So first of all, let's see why do we need to make use of Mixins. As we all know that repeating ourselves is just as bad as writing the same code over and over. So to give the same functionality to multiple components, we need to encapsulate it into a Mixin and include it in your classes. So let's understand that by making a simple Mixin. So over here I have created HTML file which is basically making use of a mixins.js, and inside this we'll be creating our first Mixin. So let's consider a scenario wherein we are creating an application and there we need a common property called name. For this instance, as in early examples you saw that our website is Skill Bakery, so something which is common across everything in this project is Skill Bakery, the company which is producing this tutorial. So over here I am taking that as an example. So let's have name as a property and the value of it is Skill Bakery. So what we are trying to do over here is, rather than writing the same get default properties method on each component, we can create a Mixin. So over here a simple Mixin with a default property name and its default value as a Skill Bakery. So we have created the Mixin now, and it's turn now to make use of this Mixin in a real component. So let's do that as well. So over here we have created a courses component, and this is something which is just saying that courses will be available on this.props.name. Now the name property as of now is not part of this component. Now in order to make use of the Mixin that we have created, what we can do is over here inside this we can simply write Mixins and then the name of the Mixin inside rectangular brackets. So over here the name of the Mixin is simple Mixin, just because we are starting with Mixin, so I just wanted to give it a simple name. And then we have our render function. Now save this one and let's render this on our browser. So we'll say react.render, and inside this we will make use of the courses component. So we'll say courses and we'll close it over here. After that I can simply assign it to the div container that we have over here. So we'll say document.getElementById, and inside this we'll pass the ID of the container, div container, and now things are fine. Let's close this one, and over here we have Mixins and Mixins.html. Now if I run this one in browser, you can see that the default name property is coming from the Mixin that we have created, Skill Bakery over here. So that is how you can create a simple Mixin and then make use of that Mixin inside a component. And this way you can create another component and make use of the same Mixin in that component as well. So let's say if I create another Mixin, so let's say where students, for instance, if we have one component, we can say react.create class, we can say react.create class, and here inside this the same way obviously we can copy it from here, and here student says I love, and this way let's create another container for this and let's have it over here, the student container. Similarly over here I can render that. Here we will have the ID, and rest of the things are pretty simple. Here we'll have students. Over here you can see that for both the components we have just defined it once inside our Mixin, and we are making use of it in different components that we are creating. Now there is one more thing to consider. So if your Mixin includes one of the React lifecycle methods, now in order to understand React lifecycle methods, we have already discussed that in previous tutorial, but anyways I'll give you a quick recap of it. For instance, we have component will mount, component did mount, and component will receive properties, should component update, and then we have component will update, component did update, component will unmount. These are the lifecycle methods. So inside these as well we can make use of it, and I'll just quickly show you how we can do that. So let's say we have our simple Mixin over here, and it has got this get default properties set to skill bakery, and then we have created over here courses Mixins. And after that, if we have to have some other properties as well associated with this courses, so we can do that over here. So let's say I'll simply copy it from here, so it will save a bit of time. Get default properties. Let's have author over here, and I'll just differentiate it by the .com value of it. So this is another default property that we have created, and we can then use it over here in a very similar way as we used this .props.name. So we can say authored by, and then we have this .props.author over here. Now if I run this one, obviously we'll be getting both the values over here. So for component, you can see that it's coming up as skill bakery and then authored by skill bakery. Let me give it a BR so it will be readable. So there you go. Now both instances of get default props in this case will get called, and so we will wind up with a default name of, let's say, skill bakery over here, and author as skillbakery.com. Now any of the React lifecycle methods or component spec methods or properties can be duplicated in a Mixin without issues, with the following exceptions. So when you are having the render, having more than one render method doesn't make sense. So obviously, and it has to return only one element. So React will tell you that if you are trying having two of them. So obviously you can't have two render methods inside a component. So that is one thing. And then the display name. Now this can be set multiple times without error via Mixin, but it is overwritten, so the last value wins. Now it's worth pointing out that Mixins is something that you can define multiple times, meaning that Mixins can include Mixins. So it might sound a bit complex, but it's not. So the way we have included it inside a component, similarly we can create one more Mixin and use the earlier one inside that. So let's have one more Mixin over here in order to just understand that. I'll say it as a nested Mixin. So I have given it a name called nested Mixin, and this Mixin will make use of the simple Mixin. So I can have it in this fashion over here. I will say Mixins, and then the same way as I used it earlier in a component, I'll use it over here. So that's how you can use a Mixin within a Mixin. And then if you want to use that one, you can go ahead and say it in this fashion. Now if I run this one, let's see what happens. You notice that the same name property is accessible via the nested Mixin as well. So that way you can make use of a Mixin within a Mixin. Now creating multiple Mixins, let's take a look at this as well. The fact that our Mixins are inside an array is a subtle hint that we can include more than one at a time. So here you see the array signature. Now, so we have created a couple of Mixins over here, but this one is nested. So let's create a separate Mixin, and then I'll make use of the get default props here, and then I'll change the name to author and the default value to skillbakery.com. So over here we have two Mixins now, simple and author, and now I can simply go ahead and do this. So the first one was simple Mixin, and the next one is author Mixin. So there you go. Now nothing needs to be changed down in the line. Just remove this get default props and all set. Now if I run this, the result will be same, but now it's coming via multiple Mixins. Couple of things that you have to take care of while working with Mixins is if you're trying to set the same property or state. So over here, the ability to have multiple calls to get default props and get initial state as well can get you into trouble if you attempt to define the same property in different places. So you have to be very cautious if you have already defined it inside a Mixin. Don't try to give it a different value in these get default props or get initial state. So for instance, if I give you an example over here, let's say we have the name as skill bakery, and then we have used it inside the component that we have created over here, and then we have a get default props. So let's have a get default props over here, and inside this one what we'll do is we'll create a function, and then inside this we'll make use of the same properties that we have over here, name and author. So if I give it a name over here, and let's give it a different name, in this case let's have Udemy, and then name as author as Skill Bakery. So now earlier the author was skillbakery.com and name was set to Skill Bakery. Now we have changed that inside this, and now if I execute this one coming up, let's see what's that. Inside console, see it says uncaught error, invariant violation, merge objects with no duplicate keys, try to merge two objects with the same key name. This conflict may be due to a mixin. In particular, this may be caused by toGetInitialState or toGetDefaultProps method returning objects with clashing keys. So this is what I was talking about. There you have to be careful. Okay, so we have to avoid that. The same error will happen if we attempt to set the same state key in multiple calls to get initial state. So don't do that either. Now, coming on to other aspect of it, if we have multiple lifecycle method call, in that the order of execution of our mixins will always be first. So our mixins will get executed first, and when we have more than one mixin included, in the same lifecycle method, they are called in left to right. So if I show you over here, we have a couple of mixins included, so from left to right they will be executed. So in short, mixins are a very simple thing that makes your React applications even more reusable.